Welcome back to Faith, Frauds, and Falsehoods, where we talk about the cults and religions of the world. Tonight, we're finishing up our discussion on NXIVM. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and help others find us.
Before we begin, let's make it clear that the opinions we present are ours alone and do not represent the views or opinions of our respective churches or employers. Brian, let's begin.
Let's do it. Let's finish up talking about NXIVM. This has been a fun month. I think we've seen some good engagement online, so that's always fun.
Some good engagement, some crazies, yes.
Yeah, well,
the nature of doing a cult podcast.
Yeah, on the internet. Who would have ever thought? But so we're tonight. We started back in January, right, with the YouTube channel, and one of the things that we decided to do was to add just a recap response kind of episode. So that's what we're talking about tonight: is responding to NXIVM.
Responding to NXIVM. Okay. Well, with these response episodes, I feel like we get to do a little bit more editorializing.
Yeah.
Now, as our viewers know, I editorialize the whole thing anyway. But I feel like you give me some more leeway on the response episodes to editorialize a little bit.
Yeah, it's much
we'll
more
quote
opinion.
some facts and things. Yep. But yeah, this is definitely more opinion, more our response from our perspective. As we mentioned, these are our opinions. They don't reflect our churches and employers. The reason we say that is because we say a lot of things on here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both of us work for employers that have some things about, hey, we don't talk to them publicly. And both of us have employers that work in the public, I guess the public sector, you would say? Definitely the nonprofit sector.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's kind of a weird space because it's not technically the public sector because it's not government.
We work with nonprofits really and churches and things a lot. I work for a very specific church, and you work for a group which works for many different churches.
Whole bunch of churches.
And I'm sure they all have lots of different opinions on things, and we're not reflecting any of that. We're kind of reflecting our opinions.
Yeah.
So, hey, feel free to disagree with us, and we'd love to hear your comments. Even if they do disagree with us, we kind of enjoy some of that. And you ought to hear us talk about the comments before we respond to the comments. Brian and I, as y'all know, are very different people, but we're great friends. And one of the reasons we're friends is that we are different people. If we were the same people, it'd be boring as all get out. Yep. I feel like we learn from each other a lot of times. And I think sometimes I learn more about myself by talking to you about things when I see you look at something with a different perspective, even if I don't agree with your perspective. And I know you don't always agree with my perspectives.
Right. Yep.
And that's just the cool thing.
It is.
So let's talk about our response to NXIVM. Now, NXIVM they're a little different than a lot of the cults and groups we've looked at before.
Yep.
They've been a challenge, I think, in some of our looking at this. I know you talked about going through the teachings. It was really a challenge for you because it really wasn't, they didn't even try to be Bible-based or what have you, like some of the groups. But we've talked about other groups that weren't necessarily, but they seem to pull from there.
Right. I think this year, I think we've both said the groups that we've talked about have been challenging. Right. I think the only group that we've talked about this year that wasn't a challenge was Herald Camping. The others have all been a challenge because of a lack of finding information, or they were too close to home, or whatever the case may be.
To home. Yeah.
So, but this one was hard just because it was so out there, right? I struggled to find a good solid footing to talk about their teachings. And we even started to record last week, and you asked me a question, and I was like, I don't know the answer to your question, Matt. Right? And it really made me to think, I've got to step back and do more research before we talk about this. So I bought Sarah Edmondson's book, and while I was working, I listened to it, put it on my headphones, and I rebuilt some switches and stuff and just listened to her book all day on 2x speed so I could get through it so we could record, right? Because she brought out things that I hadn't seen before that you had asked about. So that was hard, right? It was just different, right? I couldn't go and say, well, what did NXIVM teach about the Godhead or who is Jesus to them, right? What do they teach about salvation? They didn't have any of those kind of teachings.
Right.
So it was tough. But I sat down, what was it, Thursday night? What is today, Sunday?
Today is Sunday.
I think it was Thursday night that I sent you a message and said, I have enjoyed writing this response. So if you want to read my response, it'll be over on briangarrison.com. But I pulled out a few things that I think we need to make a point on. The first of which is NXIVM kind of actually had one thing right. Kind of, right? There's this understanding that humanity is broken, right? That where we stand, the way that we do things, the way that people behave, none of it is quite right. Keith Raniere on their website, right, from 2003, right, there's a big, bold quote if you go back and look in the archives. And he says, humans can be noble. The question is, will we put forth what is necessary? And Matt, you know, I've been reading St. Justin Martyr this last week because I'm working on a book. And one of the things that he points out, right, is in Greek, it's the spermatikos logos, right? The spermatikos logos is the seed of the word, the seed of the truth. And in every philosophy, in every teaching, in every whatever, there's at least the seed, right, that can be pushed and grown and watered and cared for that eventually leads to Christ. And I think this is their seed. Humanity is broken, right? We all struggle, right? We're all making wrong choices, right? We're all guilty at some point.
Paul said something about none are good, no, not one.
Right?
It's one of the pebbles in the Romans road there.
Yeah. And so I think we could all agree that as humans, we could be better, right? We don't have to sit idly by while there's people starving down the street. We don't have to sit back while there's people out there in the heat, homeless, right? We could do something as individuals. And I think, and you may disagree with me on this, but I think at least in the very, 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 very beginning, there was a spark of hope within these people, within Raniere and Salzman. There was, maybe we can help people. But I don't think that spark lasted very long.
I'm not sure there was a spark because he had this was an MLM company. It's a multi-level marketing company. He'd previously had other multi-level marketing company, and this wasn't the product that he sold. This was just another product for him to sell. As you mentioned, this concept that humans are flawed and we need to be better, that exists outside of Christianity. Definitely is a central theme of Christianity. Exists in many religions, as you mentioned, right?
Yep.
And I feel like that's a common thing that's easy to sell to people because people pretty much know that.
True.
And he figured that out. He had tried selling products and discounts and things before and had failed at it. Nancy was part of that as well. And Nancy was already a lover of his by the time this happened.
Yeah.
By the time they formed NXIVM. I believe that she was in it to help him make money and make herself money. She was wealthy and became much more wealthy with this. I think this was in the beginning a money-making scheme. This was to make money. He didn't do anything noble at all. He didn't really help. Yes, he sold this self-help thing, but everything he sold, as you mentioned in some of your notes here, it got more and more expensive as you went up the line.
Right. Yeah.
Right. I think he learned that very possibly from L. Ron Hubbard because he followed the L. Ron Hubbard playbook pretty well. Now, these are not the only cult leaders to follow this. But L. Ron is a long-time old-school cult guy, right?
Right.
And I think that he learned a lot of that from him. about how to sell people things. He even used a lot of terminology and stuff. You know, it's the tech and things like that. Scientology is not as strictly an MLM, and that they don't do the recruiting thing as much, but they do sort of.
But it's there's
he made it more of an MLM because that was his background. And I think that Keith Raniere is a smart person. I don't know that he's the smartest man in the world, but he is definitely a intelligent person, and he's used his intelligence for evil. Reminds me of Solomon, who had wisdom, not as much intelligence, but wisdom. And he used that to grow his kingdom and things, and he helped his people in the beginning. But then, you know what happened to Solomon?
He fell.
Why did he fall?
Women.
Lots
of them.
Now, let me make this clear. It's not the woman's fault.
Right.
So not women.
It was the sexual
lust.
immorality. Yep.
Sexual immorality, lust. That's what caused me. I don't want to look like I'm blaming a woman here for this.
Yeah, that's true. Good point.
That's not cool. We already talked about the IBLP stuff, right? We're not saying women are evil, not at all.
Yeah.
We happen to love some ourselves. But it was that sexual immorality. It was the lust. And I think that's what happened here, is that eventually it was about money at first. But I think eventually it became more and more about that. He already had a little bit of a harem going on. He had multiple lovers and things like that. But as happens, and this is why we are cautioned to stay away from sexual immorality, it becomes a thing where it becomes more and more and more, and you have to have more and more and more. And that's what happened to him. He had to have more and more, so he got more and more depraved. You know, guard your ears, little one. You know, you got to guard your ears, guard your eyes, because it will lead you down to the path of destruction. And I think that's what's happened here.
So you would say that there was never really any spark of hope there, that it was just all marketing and gimmick to sell something.
Now, with Raniere, with Salzman, now some of the people he sold this to, after reading Sarah Edmondson's book, I believe this helped her in her life at some point. It also destroyed her life, but at some point it helped her in her life and her career. And I think she genuinely helped other people with some of these concepts. Yeah. Just like we talked about in Scientology. We talked about Leah Remini in Scientology. You know, she kind of got a little bit of a help from Scientology with her career. And did it actually help with her career or not? Well, they took credit for it anyway. There are many people who say it did help them just because of being more assertive and stuff. Yeah. She may be the exception because she's pretty assertive already. But this happened with NXIVM, though. There were a lot of people who got involved with this who learning to be more assertive and be more direct and be more focused on things through this stuff they studied in NXIVM helped them with their life. So, I read something on Facebook earlier. I don't want to cross no boundaries. I don't remember who posted it, so I'm not trying to offend any of y'all, but I think I remember it being somebody who's a friend of mine, or at least somebody I'm friendly with. Right. And they were discussing Joel Osteen. And they were discussing some quotes from Joel Osteen. And they were talking to, I think, their kid or something with some quotes from Joel Osteen. And my first thought was, oh, Joel Osteen, don't they know how bad that guy is? Don't they know about his sins? Why would they listen to Joel Osteen about something? But then I read what they were writing. And the gist of it is they were encouraging their kid. They were encouraging their kid to not worry about the haters, not worry about the other people. You know?
Logos.
Yeah. This came from Joel Osteen, yes. And maybe, yes, Joel Osteen's got some bad theology and some issues. But this was a mother encouraging her child and was able to use these quotes from Joel Osteen to do that. So let's take the good. Sometimes God will use what might have been meant for evil or might have come for evil for good anyway.
All truth is God's truth, man. All truth is God's truth, no matter where it comes from.
Yeah. So I didn't say anything about that because why would I try to pull that away? Why would I inject evil into this to try to make someone more pure or something? That's hypocrisy for one, but that's also that's exactly what the the Philistines, the Pharisees. That's exactly the attitude the Pharisees had. That's exactly the attitude that Jesus tried to fight against, you know? So I'm not going to tell you that NXIVM never helped anybody, but I'm going to absolutely tell you NXIVM hurt a lot of people. And I don't mean hurt them a little. I don't mean just stole their money. I mean branded them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean rape, you know?
Yep.
We don't know about murders necessarily, but that's been discussed. It was a possibility. There may have been some hits had done. They were definitely some lives ruined over this. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think some of the followers thought it was a good thing and they were just misled. But Raniere himself and Salzman, who's gotten off way too light on this, I think. No, I think they intentionally did this as a money-making scheme. And then it evolved into a sexual scheme.
Yeah. Because they started
slavery.
to use that emotional manipulation on people to control their followers, which eventually led to the sexual immorality.
Yeah. And what do you make that mean? Mm-hmm. What do you make that mean, Brian? What do you make that mean? Turn it around to them anytime there's a problem. And I think that was originally for the money, but they used it to control their whole life so they could get their money, because they would encourage them, take out a loan on this. Mm-hmm. Do what you need to do to get the money for these things. And I will say, acting more bold in life can often be a good thing for your life. You know, I've seen a study a while back, a couple of years ago. They were talking about how, on average, women make less money than men in the same position in the United States. And they were trying to look into the causes of this. Is this a patriarchal, sexist society thing? And one researcher's input into that was they didn't think it was so much that as much as it was that women in our society are taught to be meek and mild and to not be bold and not to stand up for themselves as much.
And assertive. Yep.
And assertive. Women are less likely to go to their boss and say, I want a raise. I deserve more. You should pay me more. And so as a result, they get paid less. I see that among people. I'm pretty open about, I think I should make good money, and I've been pretty blunt about it, even in organizations that they don't encourage you to talk about those things. I mean, you've been part of that before, right? They don't really want you to talk about that, but Matt's the one who's going to talk about it and say he deserves more money. Mm-hmm. And you know what? The truth is that's benefited me. You know, overall, it's benefited me. And so I think there are things, like I said, that they've taught that was beneficial to their followers. But one thing that I thought was interesting, one of them talked about, was about how they had helped him work through all these emotional problems he had, these hang-ups. They call them EMs, right? Mm-hmm. But as soon as he got out of this cult, all that stuff came rushing back. Because what they really taught him was emotional manipulation. Yep. They really taught him to suppress it. When he seemed like he was freeing it, he really was suppressing it. So since he got out of the cult and he started working through his feelings again, all those old things came back. It wasn't true. It was just suppression.
Yep. Yeah, he never really let it all go. It was just, like you said, suppression. And that's what led to so much of their problems as they progressed, right? You can't continue down that path and be successful. It eventually comes back and it bites you.
Yeah.
So the sexual immorality became who they were, right? That maybe not the entire group, right? Because we know that there were some in the group that really had no idea what was going on. But that core group of leaders and people, this was their thing, right? This was what it was all about for them.
And most of the core group was sleeping with him.
It was control and manipulation and mastery over others. Dominus obsequious sororium. Mastery over the slave women, right? That's what it was. It was all about control.
And power corrupts. As he got more and more powerful, he became more and more corrupted, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Yep. Eventually, he violated the law. Eventually, he got called out, and eventually, he went to prison. And now he's in prison for twice his lifetime.
Yep. For the rest of forever for him.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Now,
Like
there are
one of
still
the
people who follow some of his teachings.
Mhm.
There's still a remnant left who do follow the teachings. They're not real vocal or real big. I don't know that they're going to stay around a lot, but there are still some people who follow NXIVM teachings. Even after all this, there's
It's
always some who stick around,
crazy. Yeah.
isn't it?
hmm Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, one of the things that I wrote here was systemic sexual immorality is almost always a sign of false teaching, and what we see here is systemic sexual immorality, not just one guy being immoral. Right? This is at the highest levels across the organization.
Yeah.
This is part of their system.
Yeah. It was really part of it. And, we've seen that in other groups too.
Mm-hmm.
You always have your famous quote.
Yep. All cults eventually become sex cults.
And we keep seeing that play out over and over again.
Yep.
We keep seeing that happen. And I think that's because that is, it's a sin that a lot of humanity falls for.
Mm-hmm.
Male and female. I think more on the male side than the female, but definitely male and female. The sexual morality is a huge problem for the downfall of man.
Yep. Yeah, I
And
think the first time that I said that for our podcast was probably the CSA or maybe Jim Jones. It was real early in our discussion, right? Because both of them, right, we saw it happen. Right? The
yeah,
moment that we saw it start happening is when everything started to fall apart.
yeah, we talked about with the CSA, they didn't seem so bad at first. And me
Right.
and you have both been, part of groups that sort of agreed with them in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Not at
In
the
the
end.
beginning. Right. Yeah.
Not at the end at all. They seem to be wanting to do noble things. So while they were starting with noble, I don't think that NXIVM really started noble. I really
Yeah.
don't. I think they started as a money making scheme, and he was able to use. Look, if you can feed into greed and religion on people, you got them.
Mm-hmm.
You got them. Greed's a powerful factor, but religion can be even more powerful. Greed, religion,
Mm-hmm.
then you add sex to it. Come
Right.
on.
Yep.
This was the recipe for control. This was the recipe for power. This was
Mm-hmm.
the recipe for what Raniere saw as success. But let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this is also the recipe for living in a jail cell.
Yep.
Which is
Absolutely.
where he lives now.
Yep.
And I don't care how much bullet money they put on his books or, how well you might have it in jail. Very well in jail is still very, very poor compared to what you have on outside. Yep. It is not where you want to end up. I've talked before about, man, it's so easy to start a cult. You sell these people. Now, we would never do that because we try to do things legal, ethical, and moral, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I see people who like Raniere who see this and they take advantage. And I think it's exactly what he's seen. He's seen an opportunity and he went for that opportunity. I am proud, as much as I'm often disappointed in the American justice system, I am proud that they finally stepped up and did something about it. It took a while.
Right.
Many people stood up and the American justice system did nothing. The FBI ignored it. The police couldn't get nothing or didn't try very hard. They literally let things go, as we talked about in previous episodes, let underage rape go and things like this. And then finally they got him. Finally. So I'm glad of that. I think a lot of people celebrated when he was finally convicted.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I'll finish up my response with my last quote here because I came up with some of these quotes. It's kind of nice. And then we can go through our checklist, right?
Our Kool-Aid.
Sexual and emotional manipulation in the guise of training and growth, love and adoration, tribute and veneration, in order to build up this man's organization to change the world for the better. When you put it all that way, none of it makes sense.
No.
Not a bit of it. So, Matt, are they a cult?
Yes. I think so.
I think
what's
so.
What's our definitions for a cult?
Misplaced authority.
Yep.
They placed it all in him. Eschatological error. They weren't really that kind of group, so no. So salvation error, no. Modification
Well,
of vocabulary.
well, hold up.
Oh, okay, okay,
Let's argue salvation error. While
okay.
they weren't arguing salvation per se, I think anything that doesn't point to Christ for us becoming better
True,
is a salvation error.
true. Good
I
point.
think that goes into the I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but through me. I think anything that doesn't point us eventually to Christ is a salvific error.
Yep. True. Good point. Good point. Modification of vocabulary.
Yes.
I don't. You think so?
EMs, the tech. Yeah, there were
Yeah, but
Nexium ways of things. What do you make that mean?
Yeah.
I think they
Okay.
had some of their own words. They definitely had their own phrasings for things. Vanguard, prefect, DOS.
Yeah, but I see, and this is one of the reasons that they're part of that difficult group, right? Because whenever I think of modification of vocabulary, I'm thinking they changed what the word grace means, or they changed what the return of Christ means, not just they came up with their own words for stuff. Because businesses do that, right? It's part of marketing. But so I mean, I like I said, they're a different kind of group. They're
Give
hard for
them
us
half a point for
work
that one.
Yeah,
They did have a strong marketing
and then
campaign. We could argue that.
right, and then mistaught concepts for sure, right? We
Yeah.
talked about their emotional suppression as being their solution for stuff. And that's not the solution. Centralized authority.
Yeah, and
Everything-
as the group went along, more and more it was Keith Raniere and Keith
Yep.
Raniere and Keith Raniere.
Yep, he was at the top of the pyramid. We versus they. Yep, they had their suppressive people.
Well, and they were encouraged not to
Um,
deal with the outside world more and more and more. The
Yep.
top level people were often encouraged to move to Albany, right? You
Mhm.
said they had suppressives. So it was definitely we versus they. It was definitely always trying to either convert somebody or completely ostracize them.
Right. Isolationist. I think they were starting to fall into that with everybody moving to Albany.
Yeah, there's definitely some
Starting to-
isolationistness going on there.
Yep. Starting to work towards some sort of a compound. Elitism. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And they were targeting people and trying to be just like Scientology into the
Mhm.
into the actors and things like that. And they were definitely elitism. Thought they
Yep.
were better.
Proselytism. Well, yeah, that was kind of their whole thing. They were an MLM.
Right.
Outside of the cultural normality. Yeah. And labeled as a cult by others. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I think
think
they
Rick
were labeled
Ross
as a cult
and
early on. Yeah.
Rick Ross and many other cult identification groups have definitely labeled as them cult.
Yep.
Probably the first one to call them that was the Frank Report that we quoted several times in these episodes.
Yep. So Matt, how many Kool-Aids do they get?
I'm going to give them 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I think four would be reasonable. Have we had a full 5 Kool-Aid cult yet?
Yes. Westboro.
Did we do 5 Kool-Aids for Westboro?
I'm pretty sure we did.
I don't remember.
I'm pretty black and white. I rarely give a 4 anyway. I'm pretty sure I usually say 5.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I don't live in a world of grays. Grays don't exist in my world. Everything's black or white.
that's right. Yep.
But I could go with 4 here. Only because they tried to style it as not as much of a religion as other cults.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it was absolutely a cult.
Yep.
And I got to mention, it's not Kool-Aid. It was Flavor Aid.
Right. Yep. We got to set you up for that one every time.
Yep. So listen, y'all,
Well,
I think that's all about NXIVM.
Nice.
So what do we got coming up, Brian? What do we
Matt,
got
I
to
think-
look forward to?
I think we are talking about the International Churches of Christ next.
That's one of the
and
names of it.
Is it the International Christian Church? I know it's the ICOC and the ICC.
Yes. ICOC. in the ICC.
That's who we're chatting with next week, or about next month.
Oh, it'd be fun if we could chat with them.
I know, right? If any of you know anyone from any of these groups, we would love to talk to them.
Yeah, if you're a cult leader and want to talk to us, we'll have you on. I can't say we'll agree, but we'll have you on.
That's right.
The show. Okay, y'all. Well, hey, until next week or next month or whenever we do the next show, y'all. When we have one out, you'll see it. Thanks a lot, y'all.